We all know that throughout 2025, ICE agents were using unconstitutional blunt force and inhumane techniques to achieve Trump's deportation agenda. But then, on January 7th, Renee Good was killed by ICE agents. A 37-year-old white U.S. citizen mother whose last words were, "I'm not mad at you." If they can kill her and get away with it, who's to say they won't kill any one of us and get away with it? I'm grateful that Ginger Story Welch asked me a couple of days later to lead a vigil in Potsdam. Just a couple, it was a short vigil. I know many of you were there, and it was powerful and great to be together with other people. And then on Thursday, January 15th in the evening, a message came through my Facebook feed from the Reverend Ashley Horan, a trusted colleague that I've known for 15 years and lives just blocks away from where Renee Good was killed. The message read, "A call to Minneapolis, a national invitation to faith leaders. Dr. King put out the call in Selma. We are putting out the call in Minneapolis." A spark ignited in me, a sacred tug. One of those feelings you get where if you know if you don't respond to it, you will regret it. The organizers were MARCH, which stands for Multi-Faith, Anti-Racism, Change and Healing, a queer-friendly coalition who formed years ago to get same-sex marriage passed and had a big part in organizing after George Floyd's murder. The next day, on Friday, I saw more messages. Other colleagues were talking about it. "Are you going to Minneapolis? Are you going?" And meanwhile, the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UU Ministers Association, and the UU Service Committee were getting the word out that ministers without professional expenses, that stipends were available for them. I knew this was legit. And if I was going to go, though, I needed to go with someone else. I texted a colleague of mine, Reverend Jo Von Roo in Syracuse. It turns out she was flying out of Philadelphia, but going. And she told me to contact the Reverend Douglas Taylor, who serves our congregation in Binghamton. He was thinking about going, but he wanted to sleep on it. Meanwhile, my family had already made plans to go to the German embassy in New York City to renew my wife's passport, which in these times seemed very, very important to do. After we got on a train to Albany, Reverend Douglas texted me saying he was going. His reason was simple: our colleagues are asking us. I knew I had a partner, a decade-long friend, someone to share this journey with. And began to feel different. Not just a calling, but a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage in a moment of moral clarity. I registered to go and we booked flights, and we were to meet at Syracuse in just a couple days on Wednesday morning and then return on Saturday. At this point, we had hardly any details. Training was to start in the morning on Thursday at 8 a.m., and Friday was supposed to be a day full of actions, and that was it. It turns out that one of Douglas's congregants, Carrie, is originally from the Twin Cities and has family there. So we had a place to stay if we wanted to. One option was with her uncle, who had 2 dogs and smoked cigars. I said no. Our next best option was Carrie's parents, who lived in a far-out suburb. It was not easily accessible to mass transit, But they didn't smoke cigars, and they didn't have dogs, so I said yes. So now it's early Wednesday morning. I'm waiting behind the 19th century storefronts on Minor Street, just a couple blocks from here, and the Trailways bus pulls up in front of the Gamer Craze. It's maybe a third full, and I'm one of the few people on board who is not Amish. I watch the men take their hats off, exposing their page boy haircuts, placing them in the above luggage space like good gentlemen ought to do. They always wear the same clothes, whether it's January 21st or July 21st, I noticed. And before the pink of dawn, the bus stopped on 11 somewhere on the outskirts of Governor, and an Amish woman gets out of a buggy and gets onto the bus. This was not an official stop. The day before, I was in the bright lights of Manhattan, and now I'm surrounded by candle-lit buggies. Extreme New York. The reality of the situation started to sink in. Just remember that these were some of the headlines. Can you go to the slide? ICE detained a 5-year-old, Liam Ramos. Next slide. ICE was arrested a Hmong American, a U.S. citizen, at his home in St. Paul, ripped out of his house without a shirt on, without a coat, without pants, wearing his boxers and Crocs. It was a complete mistaken identity. And the next slide, please. ICE was spraying painful yellow foam of pepper spray inches from people's faces. Thanks. And there was this comparison to Selma. And we all know what happened in Selma. Someone died. It was the Reverend James Reeb, a UU minister. I knew I could not be a martyr. I have children, and I remember thinking that's probably exactly what he thought too. This journey has to be a moral and spiritually grounded journey. If you build a life here in this country with a family, how can the government break up a family? It's inhumane. Inhumane that masked agents can whisk you off to a camp somewhere in Texas without due process. We need immigrants. And a lot of this is based on fear and race, fear of the other. And why target the Twin Cities? How big and wide is this call of love? The organizers were secretive. We had to get secure and encrypted signal apps on our phones to stay informed. Still, nobody knew where the training was. Through Signal, we got an invite to a meal at Unitarian in St. Paul. They had this Wellspring Wednesday. Besides a meal, there was a children's chapel and children's RE and a class on Buddhism for adults. I told Reverend Douglas, if we get to Unity, someone will give us a ride to our host, which is about 30 minutes away. Someone. I have the faith. Once at the Minneapolis airport, I was a bit nervous. I hadn't been there in a long time. I was a little anxious. Which bus do we get on, and where is the bus? And as soon as we walked out of the terminal, the exact bus we wanted was waiting right there. We walked on, and the bus left. And they asked for whatever the dollar amount was, and realized I only had a 20. And they said, you don't need to pay. Minnesota nice. After a few miles on the bus, I asked the bus driver about the transfer, and she had never heard of it. And we got out and to transfer to another bus, and the wind was just cutting through my thick green parka. You've seen me wear that, how thick that is, cutting through that parka. And the snow was blowing in a small and around, like tornadoes. And according to Google Maps, the next bus wasn't coming for 20 minutes. I was convinced this was it. This is where we die, a slow, painful, bitter death on the frozen, windswept prairie. The wind chill was -50. We should have just taken an Uber. Then a miracle happened. Within seconds, a bus rolled in and stopped right in front of us, and we caught it and said, "Hallelujah, thank you for saving us." As we entered Unitarian, we were greeted by the Reverend Oscar Sinclair, the senior minister there, who grew up in Binghamton and was a congregant of Douglas's. We asked Oscar if any of his members lived near where our hosts live, but he was new to the congregation, just didn't know where people lived, and he asked the membership coordinator who ran some report and couldn't find anyone that lived near and then where we were to stay, and she brought it up to the assistant minister, Reverend Shea, and said, "Oh, I just live a mile from there." So she was able to give us a ride, and Reverend Douglas and I were just giddy. And it seemed like this calling was just unfolding as true, and everything seemed to be lining up, and we had this great meal about to eat, and we just felt like we were at home. And we got a tour of their sanctuary. Could you go to the next picture? They have a beautiful sanctuary. The next picture, yeah. There's the back of Reverend Douglas. Yeah, you can go. And we met other ministers we had not seen in a while, and there were just big hugs. And there was this children's chapel that we went to, and we were supposed to turn to the person next to us and tell us something on our hearts. And there was an older gentleman seated next to me, and he just said, "My wife just died, and I'm coming here tonight to get some healing." And my heart just broke. It was just filled with compassion. Have you ever experienced where you just knew that you were in the right place and the universe had aligned? You were in the right place at the right moment. And I offered him some encouraging words. But the thing that stood out the most was how many times people came up to me and said, "Thank you for being here." At first I was like, oh, it's nothing. What am I going to really be able to do? And I went through the meal line, and I got some plant-based meatloaf. And I said thank you to the many volunteers that were there serving food. And they said, "No, thank you. Thank you for being here." During the prayer before the meal, the Reverend Oscar acknowledged all the UU ministers, and then we got this warm ovation from everyone. This was beyond the Minnesota nice thing. I began to feel their pain and their hope. That somehow we could and somehow must make a difference. My new friend, Reverend Shana, gave us a ride to our host in New Brighton, a house that they had built in the early 1980s, and much had not changed. Reverend Douglas slept in his congregant's childhood bed. One of the hosts was Sarah, who used to work for the UUA, and she was in a walker, and she wanted to be part of the movement, but couldn't. And hosting two UU ministers was her way of being part of the movement. They told us how even 20 miles away from Minneapolis, their favorite restaurants were closing because no workers wanted to show up, and they were afraid of ICE. The next morning, Reverend Shana picked us up really early in the morning, and we finally found out where we were going. Westminster Presbyterian, a huge mega church in downtown Minneapolis. When we entered it looked more like a shopping mall. They actually had an information booth that you could go up to and ask questions. There were hundreds and hundreds of clergy walking around. There's my friend Jason, who I went to seminary with, who I haven't seen in years, who lives in LA. And there's Bishop Buddy of Washington, D.C., the Episcopal priest who pleaded with Donald Trump for mercy in that homily at his second presidential inauguration. And there's the UUA president, Sophia Betancourt. There's just tons of volunteers, and there were bus tickets I was supposed to grab if I was willing to be a legal observer, and there was breakfast available, and there was these mountains of coats, sweaters, and wool socks that people in Minneapolis donated because they knew that people were coming from Florida and California. I found out why they couldn't tell us where we're to meet. The number of clergy kept exceeding the spaces they had organized it for. They had to stop the registration at 750 clergy. And I know about 150 of them were UU ministers. So at Westminster Presbyterian, could you go to the next slide? We got into this huge, big historic sanctuary, and the air was just full of electricity. The poet laureate of Minneapolis, who knew Renee Good, spoke. We were taught what was happening and how we could make a change. Rabbis spoke and indigenous leaders spoke. They talked about how we got to this point and how non-violent mass non-compliance will work. And we learned a song. One is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind this time. We get there together or never get there at all. We get there together or never get there at all. We get there together or never get there at all. No one is staying left behind this time. No one is getting left behind. No one is getting left behind this time. We get there together or never get there at all. We get there together or never get there at all. We get there together or never get there at all. All right, good job. Good job. You guys are fast learners. You can go to the... Yeah, and there's a picture of Reverend Douglas and I in the church. You can go to the next. Yeah. So shortly after that training, this is, again, Thursday morning, there was an option to go on a patrol. We had this short training session before we boarded the bus. We were told to walk around, to meet business owners, to talk to people, to hear their stories, to care, and to heal. We were taught how to legally observe, to blow whistles and videotape if we had encounters with ICE. So we entered this huge charter bus, and Ben, a Zen priest, led us in a meditation and a song as we journeyed forward. They dropped us off in South Minneapolis at Nicollet and Lake. A large immigrant community lived there where ICE agents were known to be. So in pairs, we were sent off. Douglas and I decided we had been together enough and we needed a break from each other. So I paired up with the Reverend Lisa Sherry Adams, a UU minister from Anchorage, Alaska that I've known for a decade. Let's go to the next picture. That's a picture of us. Oh, did I tell you it was really cold? Yeah. You can go next. Or blank. Go to the blank slide. Yeah. So as we walked a block or two you know, there were vacant lots and former factories, and not many people were out. It was really cold, and I was pretty convinced we would not see any ICE agents. But I asked Reverend Lisa, if you were ICE, where would you be? And she pointed, the halal butcher. She pointed to a strip mall just a block away. There were a bunch of other immigrant-owned businesses there, El Rey Bakery, a laundromat, Dominic's Tax Service, Chang's Garden. And as we approached the parking lot, I saw a dark blue SUV covered with salt, with Wisconsin plates, tinted windows, and 4 young men in it. 2 of them had masks on. We called over a pair of Baptist ministers who were walking on the sidewalk near the parking lot, Reverend Dan from Rochester, New York, and Reverend Brian from Colorado. We told them how we couldn't be exactly sure, but that was probably ICE. They were going to call over some other ministers, but we thought 4 is enough. About 10 or 15 minutes went by standing on the sidewalk between the parking lot and the stores, and all of a sudden, the SUV with the out-of-state plates drove in behind the parked car right in front of us, and seemingly from out of nowhere, 2 other minivans pulled up as well, blocking in that car. Out jumped 10 to 12 masked ICE agents and surrounded a white minivan, just feet in front of us. 4 or 5 of them created a human barrier between us and the woman they were harassing. My partner started blowing her whistle, and I pulled out my phone and attempted to take a video. It was a Latina woman who had at least 1 child in the back seat of her car, and ICE was demanding papers. I noticed another person in the parking lot get out of their car and just started angrily yelling at ICE, "Get out of here, you scum!" and more profanities that I won't say from the pulpit here. Since the other team of ministers, they were about 30 feet from me, I thought I should try to get a different angle with my phone. So I moved, and suddenly it was like, "Step back, get back." And I was like, "Okay, I'll step back, I won't go over there." And since they had masks on, and again, they were just feet in front of me, since they had masks on, all I could do was look into their eyes. And I saw young eyes. I saw their souls, their humanity. These weren't monsters. One was a kid, maybe 20 years old. His body was very stiff, and he was skinny. He was trying to look tough with a big gun. What is he here? What is he doing? I thought to myself, perhaps he wanted an employer with deep pockets, a bonus, a job with good benefits. Perhaps he also always wanted to be a cop and didn't want to go to the police academy. He had no idea what he was doing. And there was another young man, I thought maybe, he looked Latino, he was 25, I'm guessing, and below his ICE-issued vest, he was wearing just a flannel shirt. I noticed he didn't have gloves on. And the father in me interjected, "Young man, where are your gloves?" He responded with a smile, "Oh, I forgot them." I'm not sure if he forgot them in Florida or forgot them at his hotel. But how could you be so ill-prepared? I mean, it was -30 wind chill, at least. In perhaps 90 seconds, the ICE agents got the cue to leave, and they were gone. As they were leaving, I wanted to say something to them. I wanted to shout something, like, what about our shared humanity? But all I could say to them was peace. 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 We went over to the woman in the car, and she extended gratitude for us being there. She looked terrified and traumatized. "How are you?" It felt like I was a chaplain in a trauma unit in a hospital. She answered in perfect English, "I'm pregnant." What if she would have been pulled out of that car and lost her child? On her front seat, I noticed birth certificates and other papers. I asked if she wanted prayer. She was in a hurry to leave. We walked back to the sidewalk. A woman in Dominic's tax service came out and asked, rather nonchalantly, as if this happens every day, "Did they take anybody?" "No." I responded. "Oh, good," she replied. "Thanks for being here." El Rey Bakery was closed. Chang's was closed. The Halal Butcher was closed. ICE is bad for business. We walked into the laundromat just to warm up. A Chinese-American woman who worked there, or possibly was the owner, came and talked to us. "Did they abduct anyone?" "No." "Good," she said. And she thanked us, and she told us that that same SUV had been parked there for 3 hours. Just think about that. Talk about government waste. Where's Doge when you need it? How many hours, how many people hours, how much time and resources to terrorize a pregnant woman and her child? The Chinese-American woman I was talking to told me she was living in fear. She asked me what to do if ICE came into her store. "Should I carry around my passport?" she asked. And I said, "Well, I don't carry around my passport. You shouldn't have to do that, but what do I know?" And she showed me a picture on her phone of her passport. She was a U.S. citizen. A Somali-American man was also standing there talking with us. He had really dark skin and really nice pointy leather dress shoes. He asked a question that still haunts me to this day. Why are they terrorizing us? We were just in Minneapolis a matter of hours. And all of this. We walked over to a corner store. They had a sign that said, "No ICE allowed." We met the owner, Jose. He was warm and friendly. He told us it was going to be difficult to make rent this month. Everyone's afraid to leave their houses, he said. I remember telling Jose, "It's people like you that will make our country great again." It may not seem like it now, but our country needs you, Jose. I appreciate you and love that you made the choice to live here. Lisa wanted to buy a bag of chips. Jose refused payment. "You take it," he said. "Thank you for doing what you're doing." I remember walking those cold streets and just thinking, holy shit, what just happened? I'm kind of an instant processor kind of person. We got back on the bus, and Ben, the Zen priest, led us in some reflection, and he overheard Lisa and I telling our story. And then he asked the whole bus how many people had encounters with ICE. And this is a big bus, 50 or 60 people on it. Just 4 hands went up, the 4 ministers who were there. There was this moment of like disbelief. Did this really happen? I pulled out my phone to watch the video, and all I could see was a picture of my glove and a picture of a bumper. Turns out I never turned on the video. As one colleague later commented, "You sure didn't miss your calling as a photojournalist." Someone from the UUA heard Lisa and I talking, and I think she was seated near us, and when we got off the bus, she said, I'm really sorry you had this traumatizing experience, but will you give an interview? So she said, Jack Jenkins is a vetted reporter that we trust. Here he is, and I called over Dan, and I couldn't find the other person, and Lisa were there. And we told the reporter basically what I told you just now, what happened. And in all honesty, It was getting kind of verbose and long and drawn out and boring, and I knew what he needed. He needed a soundbite, and that's when I said, I'm becoming radicalized. I'm seeing our nation become more and more fascist before my eyes. I saw it. I saw it. I mean, demanding papers. I never thought I would live in a country like this. And they used that quote in the news, religious news network news. After the interview, and this is lunchtime on Thursday. After the interview, I got something to eat for lunch, and a retired minister who I had known for a while was there, and he just gave me this big hug and listened to me weep. I felt so confused and at the same time so cared for. We are repeatedly losing the country we love. What exactly have the people of Minneapolis been facing for months? This is less than 24 hours of being in Minneapolis, and I feel like my whole life has been transformed and changed, and I've become a different person. I woke with a new voice, a new urgency. And I looked around me, and hundreds of clergy dedicated to caring for each other, one in mission, in justice, and collective liberation. What would have happened to that pregnant woman if we weren't there? I don't know. Democracy may be on the decline, or perhaps we are already in the age of authoritarianism, but it's not too late. Agents in the Twin Cities have been reduced from roughly 3,000 to 650. ICE scaled back its operations there. Arrests are down. Indiscriminate street sweeps are not happening any longer. We called for Greg Bavino and Christine Noem to be fired, and guess what? They're no longer in those positions anymore. Just think if the ICE operation in the Twin Cities was successful. There would have been indiscriminate street sweeps in every major city in this country. Minnesota forced the Trump administration to recalibrate. And looking into those ICE agents' eyes, I felt a universal love. Sure, they were part of an evil system, but I realized I was living liberation. I went to liberate the oppressed. I went to liberate the oppressor as well. And in the process, I liberated myself from fear and apathy. A spark of calling that ignited into liberation. This calling, it feels warm, like a gentle fire. There's no force to it. This nudge of calling pushes us into beautiful pockets of collective liberation. The path ahead is long, but I believe we will get there together or never get there at all.